Okay, so in some of my videos, I've demonstrated some of the usages for a form. A form can be used to capture data and save it to a table. That is, it could either create a whole new record or modify a pre-existing record in a table. A form can also be used to set the criteria for, say, a query, and then the query gives results based on that criteria that was transferred by the form. But there's something else a form can be used for. A form can be used for, say, a calculation. For example, think of it like a website where you want to calculate an estimated mortgage payment. So you put in the loan amount, you put in the interest rate, you put in how many years, the term, and then you hit calculate, and it gives you an answer. So in that case, the form isn't being used to really capture any data long term. It's just simply accepting user input and then makes a calculation, and that's it. So there's no modification, there's no permanent or even a long-term record entry occurring. That basically it's self-contained within the form. So that's what we're going to look at in this tutorial, is how to do that. So let's start by creating a form. So we click on the Create tab. We click on Blank Form. And no, it's not necessary for this tutorial, but I'm going to do it anyways. I like to shut off the record selectors. I think it's a good habit to get in. So click on View and click on Design View. And with the form selected, click on Design, Property Sheets, Format tab, and then shut off Record Selector and Navigation Selector. So again, no, you technically don't have to do this for this particular tutorial. This form is not going to be linked to a table, so there's no records to navigate, but still I think it's a good habit to get in to make sure you're locking down your database. Okay, so let's go ahead and just save this, and we'll leave it as Form 1. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start adding the controls. So we're going to add 3 text boxes, and then a 4th text box at the bottom, and a button. So the 3 text boxes that will first be entered will be for the user data entry. So they're going to enter, in this case, we're just going to do a sum. And so they can enter 3 values, and then when the user clicks on the button, the 4th field will display the value. So let's go ahead and click on text box, left click, drag, and let go. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this rather than going up here and clicking on it a bunch of times. And the reason for it is this will help you maintain, if you want a consistent size and a consistent appearance to your fields, that your controls that you're adding. So we can just do right click, copy, paste, just grab an edge, drag it down, and copy, paste, drag that down, and then copy, paste, and drag that down. So yes, you could indeed use text box 4 times, but again, it's a quick little shortcut that lets you make sure that they're all the same size, the same formatting, that kind of thing. Like say I had changed this so it was bold. When I copied it, it would also be bold, things like that. Okay, so we have our 4 text boxes. Now let's give them a name so it's a little bit more easier to select from the drop-down lists, which you'll see in a minute. So we'll click on the first one, and we'll just go to all, and the name is at the top, and we'll just call this user underscore val underscore 1. Click on this one. Again, the all tab for name, user underscore val underscore 2. This one, again, the all tab, name, user underscore val underscore 3. And then we'll do sum underscore total. You have to be careful when you're using words that are operators or functions. So you want to be careful when you're using words like sum and words like date and things like that, you're going to always want to add a few extra characters to it just to make sure the database doesn't get confused. It's really a best practice. So even though this is meant to be a sum field, don't call it sum. Again, append the word total to it just to make sure that you're not using protected operators or functions and that kind of thing, because then you might have your database do something that you really don't intend it to do. Now, if you noticed, we changed the name, and yet this still says text. That's because we changed the name of this object. This is technically a separate object. This is a label. It's just that when you create a text box, it also auto-generates a label. You could technically separate the label away from the text box if you want. So even though you chose text box, it actually created a text box and a label, and this does indeed function as its own object. The only thing that's being done here is really with movement, and that is if you move one, you move the other. Unless you want to grab the corner, then you can move them independently of each other. So that's why these have not changed. Not going to bother with that at the moment. Actually, we'll call this one sum total, if I could spell. And one of the nice things about this being separate from this is you could leave this as a technical term that means something to you, the designer, but give it a friendly, user-friendly name for the end user. Okay, so we have 3 fields, well, technically 4, and right now they are unbound, so they're not getting data from anywhere. Now we're going to add the button. So we'll click on the button, and we'll just put it in the middle here. We get an advisory, which is kind of funny because Microsoft is warning us about a Microsoft product, but that's okay. We'll click on open, and then we'll cancel this because we're going to manually put it into what's known as a class module. A class module is simply some code, an event procedure that is attached to a specific database object, as opposed to a standard module, which would be accessible to any of the objects within the database. So we'll just go ahead and hit cancel. And we'll click on this, and we'll just change the name displayed here, and we'll call this add. Now again, this has like a label. See how it says caption add, but the name is still command 8. So just as these we changed the name of the object and the label was unchanged, it has a separate caption. So changing one does not change the other. So we'll call this total underscore BUT for button. So again, good teachable moment about the difference between the name of the object and a label or a caption that the end user is seeing. And let's save that. So now what we need is as I said, a class module. We're going to add a procedure to this button when it's clicked. So with this button selected, click on event, and there are several different events such as mouse over and things like that, but we want to just use click. When you click on the button, we want something to happen. So go ahead and click on the ellipsis and choose Code Builder. Now, if you want to refer to an object that the script is attached to, so this is attached to a button and the button is attached to a form, use the word me. So me dot sum total is going to be equal to something. Now, sometimes things aren't quite as easy in Access as you'd like them to be. If I try to just say the 3 fields added together, it's going to concatenate them. So you need to declare the fact that you want the values to be treated as numbers and not strings. So CDBL, so you're saying it's a double, parenthesis. And it's letting you know that this is a pre-existing function. And again, me dot and did we call it user? Yeah, user val 1, and then the and symbol, the plus sign, I should say, cdbl me.userval2, and the plus sign again, cdbl help if I actually typed what I was saying, me.userval3. There we go. So let's go ahead and save that. So we've now created a class module. Again, it's attached to a specific database object rather than being accessible to the entire database. So now if everything works as intended, when we enter a value in each one of these and then click add, this should then display that value. So let's go ahead and save, view, and we'll put in 1, we'll put in 5, and we'll put in 9. So it should say 15 instead of 159. Because again, if we didn't specify that it's a number, it would concatenate. And there we go, it is 15. So just like that, you've added a calculation to your form. Now you could argue that this isn't terribly useful because this is basically a grade school calculator and not much more. So if you want, I can show you additional examples, but more than likely what you're just doing is if we go back to design view, actually we can just open up the code. If you have a specific function for the button, it's just a matter of putting in the right equation now because you've declared this value, this text box is going to store a value. This is the value. So maybe what you have instead of 3 random numbers, you would have loan amount, and you would have, say, term, and you have interest rate, and then it calculates the payment. You could do something like that. If you want, I can look up what the standard amortization is, and it would give us what that payment would be. And you could also break it down that way too. You could show what the interest would be and what the principal would be per payment and that kind of thing. So, but that's how you do it. That's the way that you use a form to basically be self-contained for some kind of calculation. Maybe there's something that your end user is doing and you want to give them a handy calculation without them having to, a handy calculator without having them to bring up something else externally like the calculation app or whatever. Or maybe this is some kind of lookup. But anyways, so that's what we're going to show in this tutorial. If you have any questions, just let me know.